Very good. Thank you and welcome everyone. My name is Anthony Marshall and I chair the Board of Advisors at the Global Thought Leadership Institute. And I'm filling in this month for Lucia Rahili from McKinsey, who's on break. But we are extremely excited to be here talking about thought leadership and ecosystems. And I'm joined today by three eminent colleagues and very excited. Firstly, Cheryl Chamberlain, who's the SVP of Business Development at Yubico. Second, Richard Cockle, who's the head of the Innovation Foundry at GSMA. And thirdly, Priya Kurian, who's research director at the IBM Institute for Business Value, specializing specifically in ecosystems. So delighted to be here with you and all of my colleagues on the panel here. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'll keep on monitoring and I'll be very happy to share them with the team here during our session. But let's start with Cheryl. Cheryl, tell us a little bit about what you do at Yubico and the role that ecosystems play in your work there.
Delighted to. Well, first of all, if you think about it, organizations, when they're growing, needs to have a very strong ecosystem. And Yubico looked out to me last year at this time to bring me into the organization to run business development. And business development is really aligning all of the ecosystem partners that we work with, which are hundreds of them, with our overall strategy and go-to-market motion, particularly with system integrators. So when you look at that combination of what can be achieved by bringing them together, the company is able to grow and expand in the way that they want to. So what I tell people I do is I get people and organizations to work together to build more than they ever could do for their customers alone and individually. So, and by the way, they don't always know they're going to do that, but when they do, they're on board, which is a great way to define what my role is.
That's fantastic. Just a quick follow-up. So you've been in tech for a while. I've noticed over the last 5 years personally that ecosystems are beginning to become far more resonant in the technology domain. Is that something that you've seen as well?
Oh, absolutely. If you think about it, customers are not just buying a technology, they're buying the integration of technology that's managed by services. So more and more you're seeing technology companies work more closely together, but they're also reaching out to that consulting organization that brings that value together so the client can consume it. So yes, I am seeing that.
Fantastic. So, Rich, GSMA, clearly the leader in the telco space, also responsible for two of the really big conferences with Mobile World Congress each year. What's your role in that organization and where does ecosystems play there?
Wow, I think we're really at the heart of a massive ecosystem. For those of you that don't know who the GSMA is, it's the Global Trade Association for all of telco. So we have all of the big telco players as our members and the surrounding ecosystem that supports it. My role inside the GSMA is that I have the pleasure to run our innovation foundry, and that's where I was asked a couple of years ago to try to think about how we could do innovation and collaboration different. And we've taken a more of a skin in the game approach. So a lot of the work we do in a trade association is all about everybody coming to the same agreement, whereas this is very much a speedboat area where we're trying to get those people that are keen to do some innovation and collaborate together across different, ecosystems, for example, can collaborate in a way which is governed by themselves and can be done quickly. The second part of my job, where it's quite there's probably a fair bit of relevance, is that I'm responsible for our connected industries program as well. So this is about trying to work out how do we engage better with other, verticals or other sectors, trying to understand what their needs are, trying to translate that back into what the mobile sector and the telco sector can do to meet those needs, but then also to be able to educate them on what the art of the possible is. So, very much at the heart of ecosystems.
Very good. So Cheryl mentioned, Rich, a rise in sort of an orientation towards ecosystems in tech, particularly over the
Yeah.
last half decade or so. Have you been noticing a greater willingness in the telecommunications domain as well? over the last half decade or so, or not so much?
Yeah, definitely, because it's going to be the areas of growth for telco going forward. Enterprise and bringing the right kind of solutions that can help those enterprises deliver the outcomes that they want to achieve to deliver their business outcomes. It's going to be critical and it's going to be a huge opportunity. Every sector, if you look around business, is going through some form of digital transformation, and connectivity is going to be central to that, be it to do with AI, be it to do with capabilities which are being offered. So for our sector, this is a massive opportunity if we can get it right. And the only way we're going to get it right is by building the right ecosystems.
Yeah, that's great. And maybe we can, a little bit later, we'll get back to the topic of convergence of industry as well. I think that might be really interesting in terms of the ecosystem sort of story that you're seeing here. But let's turn to Priya right now. Priya, you're with the IBM Institute for Business Value, or IBV. What role do ecosystems play there, and what is your specific role within that?
Uh, Thanks, Anthony. In terms of the role of ecosystems here, IBM does work with a huge number of partners, whether it's for its services business or the technology business. So, one of the elements that we are doing at the IBV is to bring together some of our key technology strategic partners as well as industry partners such as the GSMA, so that we are creating thought leadership that is done in partnership. And the reason for us to do this is because, as both Cheryl and Rich talked about, the environment is getting so much more complex. And this is a way of partners talking about a particular problem area and how we together have a point of view on how to solve the area.
Okay, fantastic. And in your experience, has ecosystems become more important in the IBV over the past several years?
Absolutely. So I have watched the growth of our partnerships and the reports that we do with several partners over the last several years. In fact, I think, Rich, we go back a long way where we did the first GSMA report together several years ago. What we see is that this is now something that is being acknowledged, Anthony, as an area that is of value both to each of the individual partners, or if it's multiple partners, all of the partners involved in the thought leadership, but also for clients because they see value in the joint thought leadership as well.
Okay, great. So if you have any questions for Cheryl or Rich or Priya, share them in the chat. I'm monitoring that. I'd be happy to raise them. But let's turn back to Cheryl. So Cheryl, Global Thought Leadership Institute is a nonprofit designed to raise quality and consistency in thought leadership. Does thought leadership play a role in Yubico at the moment, or what's your experience in the past in relation to thought leadership?
100%. And if you think about the industry that I'm in, which is focused on security and making sure that we can protect your identity, because identities today are forefront for everybody, because with that protection, we can fulfill not only what we're doing personally, but professionally work across organizations. But then when you think about the impact that we're going to have on industry policies and standards that are driving requirements around identity, which is a larger cybersecurity focus area. Yubico steps up constantly in that area. In fact, we're in the process of writing a thought leadership paper with an organization called Venable, and we'll include our partners in that paper, other partners that are go-to-market partners, so that insurers understand the impact of ensuring that they're keeping their clients safe. And you don't do that by educating them through only a webinar. You do that by writing thought leadership and sharing that and having them talk to their clients about it. So all of that to come back to, yes, because of the space we're in, the importance of what Yubico is providing to the community, we are definitely involved in thought leadership.
And how do you deploy the thought leadership? Is it so? I guess you release it, and it's designed to sort of bring up the brand of Yubico, I would imagine. But do you actually have your team sort of going out and having, taking it and sharing it with clients and presenting it to them? How does the dynamic actually work?
Well, I actually learned a lot from IBM IBV, and that is that when you build a thought leadership paper, it's stale if you just put it on a website. It becomes valuable to clients when you hold roundtables, when you host webinars, when you take that information that you've pulled together and you go into different forums and get feedback. So yes, we are constantly doing that. In fact, Yubico has its first UB Nation, where we're bringing our clients together to talk about this industry, about security, about identity. And we will be showcasing thought leadership papers at that event so we can get feedback, not only from clients, but industry leaders. So yeah, it does make sense. You have to make it a breathing document, and that's what builds value for everyone.
It's fantastic. Turning to you, Rich, I mean, you're in this sort of enviable position where you've got this massive, um, I would say them deployment channels, if you will. But what role does thought leadership sort of play in what GSMA does, and even more specifically in the Innovation Foundry? What how do you engage or build or deploy thought leadership there?
Yeah, it's probably two different answers for you to the two parts of the question. It's very enviable our big distributed network, but you've got to remember that's made up of 700 different companies effectively. So um, the way that mobile works is it's a distributed network of networks that has been built on interoperability and roaming standards. So that's why your one number will reach you anywhere in the world. However, what that means is that when we want to do something new, we need to convince effectively 750 stakeholders to make a consistent change across all of that mobile phone network or those mobile phone networks. So thought leadership plays a massive role in being able to convince 700 people that they need to go and make the same change to make that consistent product, which we've all now live and depend on in terms of our phone always working where we are. And that ranges everything from simple voice services through to data services through to things like identity. You know, the SIM card gets recognized on any network around the world, just bringing in the identity angle. And that's zero touch kind of identity that's been created. So thought leadership plays a massive role in what comes next. Inside of the Foundry, we very much try to look at what's coming next. So we try to look at what new cutting edge technologies is coming along. And then what we try to do is, build projects around it. And then the whole aim of the Foundry is that people come together. The GSMA does things a bit differently so that we can support it. But the deal is that we then share with everybody the activities that we do in the Foundry. So all of the lessons learned. So very much in the Foundry, we use that to start exploring where the next big thing is so that we can then start sharing the learnings with the rest of the ecosystem.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to jump to Priya. I'm starting to get questions in the chat, so I'm going to accelerate a little bit because I want to be able to get to them. But Priya, IBV has been around for almost 25 years, and it does thought leadership. So sort of like, I'm not going to ask you what is the role of thought leadership, but what is the role? Why do you think IBM has been supporting the IBV's existence for a quarter of a century at this point? What do you see the IBV as delivering for the wider organization?
In terms of what IBV delivers for the wider organization, Anthony, one of the elements I see us doing really well is looking at the business value of technology, right? So we've got IBM has a huge number of clients around the world, and they may be at different stages on their journey on decision making on what they're taking forward. The role of thought leadership is to help influence the decision makers, the executives, provide perspectives. What is a trend? What is not? What's a pressure point? What are some of the things that you may not have thought about? And that helps them make better buying decisions, helps them make better decisions within the organization on how they take technology forward. And so this is one of the reasons why IBM has been funding IBV for 25 years, because it's a very important perspective, a non-commercial, non-sales, non-marketing oriented perspective that is independent and something that execs can rely on.
Very good. So I'm going to jump to a couple of the questions here. I think one of them is less a question and more an observation, Cheryl, about a point that you made from Cynthia, who basically says, agreeing about the roundtables and bringing the content to life. But I'm going to ask you another question here. Um, how would you differentiate between marketing and thought leadership, and how does that operate at Yubico and in your previous experiences?
I love that question because I work for the chief marketing officer. Now, I have to say, I worked for the president when I joined, and he got promoted to CEO, and he said, "Well, you can't work for me anymore." Like, that's fine. And then I worked for the chief marketing officer, and I was like, "How do I introduce you? I do business development." And then we came to the understanding actually, what we do together is really even more strategic because of the reporting structure. Marketing takes all of the content and ideas and then synthesizes it so people can consume it, clients can consume it, partners. And what business development and ecosystems is doing is capturing more information, particularly thought leadership, because I have a team of technical leaders that are looking at what's going on from a policy and technology direction, and then feeding that into what we want to communicate externally. So really, it's all intertwined together. It's no longer separated. I would look at marketing as really taking everything that we're doing and presenting it to our clients, customers, and partners.
Right. Rich, do you see a tension in GSMA about, any tension between marketing and thought leadership, or how do you sort of interpret that framing?
I think there's a little, for us, it's a little bit different. There's a mixture of, we like to market our thought leadership because we need to try to get it out to the people that we need to try and convince. So we need to drag people in. And so there's a nice tension between the two things of, if we can market some of our thought leadership correctly, we can get the right eyeballs to look at it. And then hopefully that can then help us do what we need to do across the ecosystem. So for me, the two things are tightly linked together and work hand in glove to enable us to get our message out there.
Great. Priya, from your perspective, how does marketing fit with what the IBV does in terms of thought leadership?
Well, marketing plays a big role in helping get the thought leadership out in the various channels that we have. So whether it's in certain media, whether it's from a perspective at events, they play a key role in supporting us and taking this forward. So there's absolutely a relationship and an important relationship between marketing and thought leadership.
Mhm. Okay, great. So Cheryl, jumping back to you, you talked about a couple of the partners that you're working with right now in the thought leadership that you're building. How do you make decisions about who to partner with? What sort of are the I don't know, driving imperatives that you're pursuing to decide whether to actively pursue a partner?
It's often customer driven. It's really clients that are coming to us with their business problems and suggesting and really recommending that they need us to be managing the integrations between our technology and that partner's technology, but not to stop there, like to build it beyond that integration so that there's a go-to-market motion so that both organizations can get the value out of what we're doing when we're driving those outcomes to customers. So definitely demand in the market, but also listening to our product organization. So a chief product officer is trying to build new technology and more value into what we're delivering to the market. So they will also come in and say, if we're going to go in this direction, I need this group of partners for you to build a business relationship with first. And then we can talk about those technical integrations. If the business relationship is not strong, then no matter what you do on the technology integration side, it won't really deliver what the expectations are that you have for what you're working on together.
So do you see the thought leadership being an end in itself, or is it more a strategic device to build relationships and build trust, or a bit of both?
It is a little bit of both, but I would really lean towards the second because it's driving outcomes. So it's really important to have that thought leadership. If that does not exist, then nothing else really is sticky and builds the value that you're looking for.
Right. Very good. Rich, from your perspective, I would imagine you have lots of opportunity to partner in a thought leadership context. How do you decide who and how to do that?
Yeah, it's really down to, what our priorities are, but also where we think we can get the most reach from the work that we do together. So, working with partners that have got, the same level of interest and excitement about us, about what we're trying to achieve, but also what audiences are we trying to reach. So I've have quite an interesting role where I have the joy of trying to work within my own telco ecosystem. And that's one way, that's quite interesting in terms of where you think they should compete, that where you think they should collaborate and have the same viewpoint. They don't necessarily. But then I also get to work with my own ecosystem, working with other ecosystems in other sectors. And the dynamic difference is quite stark in terms of seeing how people behave and how they interact. So it's really, thought leadership can be used in many different ways. Over when I'm talking to another ecosystem, it'll be around education, getting them interested and getting them involved in what we're trying to do. And the other one will be about convincing them and then helping them to, hopefully build their business case to get them to do a specific activity.
Well, there's so much convergence, industry convergence in telco. Um, from your experience, what are some of the dynamics? What are some of the themes that or characteristics that you've seen of different types of organizations in different types of industries and different types of working cultures, if you will, or other things? So, what sort of patterns have you seen that you can share with the team here on the call?
So if I look at within the telco sector, within my current, traditional membership, that's 30 years worth of the GSMA, it's really interesting because we have, for example, in the US, we have AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mo. They're all members. We might want to try to do something that will benefit every single mobile operator around the world and whatever, but there might be some tensions in a particular market because those guys are used to competing all the time against each other. So when you bring them in the room and sit down together and then try to get them to collaborate on working on a particular issue to try and resolve it, you've got that tension naturally within those kind of relationships. Say, for example, I then maybe go and speak to the financial services sector. So, we did it recently here in the UK, working with the UK finance. And then we sat down the UK banks, we sat down the UK MNOs or mobile operators, cellular operators, and then got them to start talking. At first, they were speaking completely different languages, not really even sure why they were there. Gradually, through, you could say it's thought leadership and or examples, got them to begin to understand each other, and then got them to build some trust amongst each other, and then got them to understand how each other worked. And then we asked the banking sector, what's your biggest problem? And they told us what it was. And then we ran a project to try and address that problem around fraud and scams in a really collaborative way, because there wasn't any of the tension that we would have seen if it was within, in my traditional ecosystem. So, it's fascinating being able to watch it work, and then every sector's got a slightly different personality, depending how they all work together.
Very interesting. Priya, how does the IBV decide who to partner with and how does that sort of play in relation to the wider IBM ecosystem, I guess?
Well, we follow the IBM ecosystem in that we work with the key strategic partners. So we are a small team, so we started in places, but over a period of a few years, we now work with all of the key strategic partners. So that's one of the ways of doing it. So we are aligned with IBM from a standpoint of the partnerships that matter to IBM are the ones that also matter to the IBV. But when it comes to elements such as, looking at how this then goes forward, there are annual reviews to take a look at how well thought leadership is working out for both from our standpoint and from the partnership standpoint, and we have an evaluation of whether we want to take it forward into the next year as well.
Right. And what role does the ecosystem that IBV is building integrate with the strategies of the IBM organization? How does that align?
I We are very well aligned. And so some of the biggest partnerships that IBM has also turn out to be some of our big partnerships from a thought leadership standpoint. And the reason is because the alliances find thought leadership a strategic tool to utilize. They find that when the partner and IBM using the IBV thought leadership jointly approach clients, it's much easier to have that conversation. So it's not just an IBM opinion or partner Ray's opinion, but it is an IBM plus partner Ray joint perspective. And that works very well for clients because they're hearing not two different voices, but actually coming together on a theme.
Very good. So Cheryl, back to you. So we've talked about partners. Let's turn to content.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that a lot of the decisions and motivations you have are coming from your customers. Is that the primary way you decide what topics to cover, or are there other things that sort of feed into those decisions?
It's not just the clients and customers, but we're also looking at what's happening in the market. And the market in this case, I mean, we talked a lot with Richard about from an industry perspective, a little bit about from a regional perspective. So if we look at what's happening around identity and what we need to do in different countries like Japan, or what's happening that's changing there, where the government is putting regulations in place that are requiring their clients or their constituency to make decisions. So we're following what's happening at a global level, but with a very specific country point of view. And that's part of what business development does for Yubico. Not only understanding our ecosystem, but we have to understand the challenges that are happening in particular markets. That's just one example, but we can look at many others around the world. There's just a new regulation that came out in the EU that are making requirements in the financial services industry. So what can we do to make sure those customers are meeting those regulations in the short time frame that's been represented as October of this year? So we have to have that pulse on what's happening in the industry and then come back inside and talk about what we need to do to get recognized and who do we partner with so we can solve those problems for our customers.
And do you have a formal board, or what's the actual internal dynamic? How do those decisions, how are they made?
Yes, you definitely need internal formal boards. And in our case, we have product thought leadership boards, but we have ecosystem boards, different boards that help make things happen. And then you always take the final outcome to the executive leadership team and present to them, and then ultimately to the board of directors. So it's nicely structured so that we're able to move at speed and not lose the traction that we need to build in the short time frames that are happening today.
Right. Rich, your tapestry of potential topics would be enormous, but even within an area, say, you were talking about banking and say telco banking convergence, there's so many topics in there as well. How do you decide which topics to specifically focus on or prioritize?
So internally, we've got mechanisms inside the GSMA. We've got a board which is made up of the 26 biggest mobile operators from around the globe. Within that, we've got a strategy group. So they kind of set a general direction for us to work within. And then you're right, you could say go and tackle healthcare, which my God, that's a monster. But what I try to do and the practice that I always try to preach is that it's about adjacency. I need M&Os to make business decisions to do stuff. That generally needs them to make an investment case. And you can't do something which is too far away from their core business because their business decision making won't enable them to be able to make it because it won't compute with all of the the KPIs and metrics which they work in. So I try to rationalize a lot of the work around the relevance and the value that we can bring without it being a huge mental shift for our members to be able to do those things. In terms of the way we do it into practice, we do a lot of thought leadership, but an old friend of mine many years ago gave me this great term, a dusty document. We don't want to be writing dusty documents that just end up on the shelf that may never get downloaded, look pretty. They'll have a shelf life of relevance for a couple of months maybe. What we try to do is always turn that into practice. So we try to really make practical things happen out of any thought leadership that we take. Many years ago, not many years ago, a couple of years ago, Priya and I were looking at AI and looking at Gen AI. And then we managed to find a way for us and IBM to collaborate together to be able to take opportunities to our members, if they so wished, to be able to have a practical play with Gen AI tools to help them understand how it could impact their business. Where could that give them an opportunity to, bring business benefits, learn and play with it, not just read it in some fancy paper that they've read from a particular author. So for me, a lot of that is all around, making it feel real, making it you understand how you can practically use it.
And from your experience of working with so many different organizations in different industries, is it a struggle to get them to understand that?
Yes.
Um, or what's the dynamic often?
So a lot of the problem we have is that I talk technology, and I think a number of us probably will, and it's very easy for us to talk about technology and to talk about the problems we can solve with technology. I learned many years ago that a CIO of a supermarket chain doesn't wake up and worry about 5G. They worry about the problems that connectivity will enable them to solve and how it will enable them to hit their KPIs and their business metrics. So, very much, making sure that we speak the right language, making sure that we, enables us to communicate better with them.
Right, that's fantastic. So, Priya, from your perspective, how does the IBV select particular topics or even sort of domain areas um, to research in?
So we have our internal board where we take a look at the whole portfolio, look at themes that are going to be relevant, important, but we are looking at it from several dimensions, overlaying where we are writing about it, for which type of role we're writing about it. We are also looking at where we partner with firms and are writing about a topic. So we cut the information in different ways, but we also have IBM feeding us with inputs on this is becoming important. We have our own horizon scan. So it's an amalgamation of several of these things together. And then we have core teams that are making the decisions on the portfolio for the next 6 months, for the next year ahead. That's how we take it forward.
Very good. I've got a question from in the chat, which I might share with you, Cheryl, if that's okay. So it's a question about if someone is from a smaller organization and they want to engage more effectively in an ecosystem, and they might have deep domain experience. What advice might you give them in order to sort of achieve their objectives and sort of become more central to whatever ecosystems are out there?
Well, that's the important part of building relationships. So the way you get in the door to even be considered as a thought leadership partner, if your company is small, it's through relationships or other people that you may know that have decision-making authority. So for me, and I can look at this over time, many of the organizations that I work with, I know the leaders there. So I've been in business for a while, so you get to know who they are. But when a smaller organization wants to get access, that what they often do is reach out to those leaders and build their business case just to open that door a little bit. And then you start to realize that there could be opportunity, or it might not be with your company. You could open the door in a different direction, which brings back together the real importance of building this incredible ecosystem of partnerships, but also the relationships that you've developed with people over the years. It's funny, somebody wrote, like, your partnerships and the relationships you have, you can't put them on a resume, but they actually show up day to day in the work that you do, because you're bringing those broad relationships forward so that you could achieve more than what you had originally considered initially. So yes, you may not be able to get in the door as a small company, but you may be able to find a way to find that niche where you fit, and you do that through multiple ways, but it's all through relationships.
Right. So if there's an individual in a small organization, um, what what I guess they need to bring something special.
Yeah.
So to even have the ability to even start that process. So what sort of specialness? I know one is domain expertise, clearly, but are there other things that might be able to play to a strength, be a strength that they can sort of leverage? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're talking about being special. So, do you have access to a certain market, a certain industry, to resources that perhaps a company has not thought about initially? So, it's really packaging up what you have in a way, but you have to know what the company that you're talking to wants to achieve. So, you have to do a lot of research to get that small door open, but it can happen.
Right, very good. Rich, turning to you, a very different question. So, with your role, you would be involved in a lot of internal collaboration, I would imagine, but also with all of your sort of external ecosystem engagement. Um, there'd often be disagreements, I guess, between different individuals and organizations. How do you work through resolving those sorts of things? You mentioned that before you got people in a room and they didn't know what they were doing there, but you got them to a place that was, I assume, a good place. How do you get them there, and how do you deal with conflict sort of in that journey?
I think sharing as much um, as possible. A lot of people have different perspectives, and we work globally, and there'll be different business contexts around the world. So you can imagine we could be sat with a North American mobile operator or telco provider, and maybe somebody from Southeast Asia. Different business regimes, different requirements on maybe a piece of work that we're working on. We try to do is kind of break it down into really trying to understand where and what the problem is, because a lot of the time, a lot of it can be lost in translation, and then just try to see where we can reach a point of consensus. And if we can't, then as a trade association, we have to just agree that that can't be a topic that we can agree on. That's where we do things a bit differently in the Foundry, because we have the big GSMA, which works around standards where you need to get consensus. But with the Foundry, we have a way of being able to play with some of these topics, prove them, understand them, which can then be maybe used to convince others that may have been skeptical, may not have, liked a particular type of technology. So it gives us the ability to be able to, I'm going to use the term, play around and learn and explore and, be young before you start, and then hopefully to break down some of those barriers that may have been stopping people to be able to agree within, the more formal standards part of the GSMA.
So you talked about being able to prove things in the Foundry. How do you actually
Yeah.
do that? What constitutes a proof of something?
Yeah, so we bring together a number of partnerships. There'll be a business problem that they're trying to solve, and then we'll under the GSMA framework, we've got an antitrust policy, and we've got IPR policy, which enables us to allow people to collaborate together, and then they can begin to prove what they want to prove. For example, we did a piece of work around whether we could use network APIs to reduce the number of people being scammed in the UK. Back to that UK, but we had an idea, we tested it, we trialed it out, we got a set of learnings, we went reiterated round and got to a point where we generated a really positive conclusion. And then we just shared it with the rest of the relevant ecosystem to be able to take advantage of. So, that's the way that we try to play and demonstrate leadership.
Priya, just got a very interesting question in the chat that I'll direct to you. And so, how is AI changing the thought leadership ecosystem itself? It makes it easier for smaller organizations to come in and sort of get scale. But are you seeing any noticeable change specifically because of AI?
Yes, um, it's kind of leveling some elements of the content creation, as many folks have experienced. You have AI writing out thought leadership and content. I think this is a space where ecosystem and partnerships play a specific role because it's not going to be about who publishes the most amount or volume of content. It's about building the strongest ecosystem to provide insight. And that insight is something that comes through when you're working with partners.
Very good. All right, so I'm going to turn to wrap up a little bit now, since we're about 4 minutes away from our official end. Going to go back to Cheryl. Two questions for you, Cheryl. So number one, what is the upside of all this? What is the what do organizations get by being really effective collaborators in a around thought leadership in an ecosystem? But also, secondly, what advice might you give to the people on the call about how to be really successful in this?
Well, number one, for an organization, the market is changing very quickly. We talked a little bit about AI, but there's a lot of other things that are changing. Quantum is starting to affect what we do. So it's really important today to ensure that the ecosystem that you're building is in the same place that you are, and that you're communicating on an ongoing basis to make sure that you're moving forward together and not separately. So all of those changes are significantly impacting your customer relationships, but outcomes that all organizations want to achieve, which is business success. So number one, it's critical. And then what recommendation would I have? You have to keep your ecosystem strong at any time. Just because you're not working with somebody today, you want to keep track of what they're doing. You can do it through thought leadership, writing thought leadership, soliciting input, but also staying connected on an ongoing basis and communicating during that process. So don't just read and state so that they know that you're still part of the world that they're involved in.
Very good. Rich, same question. So what's the upside and what advice would you give sort of someone on the call?
I think from my side, I've realized I can have more impact by having good partnerships and working with somebody and trying to align with them to have a common outcome opens doors that would never be open to me by having those partnerships. Enables me to elevate and amplify any thought leadership that I might have beyond my own walls of my own environment. So I think picking a good partner to work with that can open doors for you, that you can both support each other. I found that's the best way to be able to have as much impact as possible.
Very good. Any specific advice in addition to that that you'd like to share?
Make it practical. Make it so that somebody can learn. A lot of the time, I think thought leadership is helping people to, do their business case or helping them to do their strategic plan. Give them something tangible that they can take away and they can apply within their business. It's all right having long reams of paper around strategic directions of the market that's going in. A lot of the time, that doesn't help me in my day-to-day job. So finding something practical that I can leverage, I would say increases the value massively.
Excellent. Priya, last word from you. What's the upside and any advice?
The upside I see, Anthony, is that the value of an ecosystem is not just about amplifying an idea. It's what I think when we were promoting this on LinkedIn, the IBV social media team said productive disagreement. And I really like that because if you can challenge the idea, refine it, make it something even more valuable, that's probably the greatest value from the ecosystem around thought leadership in particular. In terms of advice, I think we've covered lots of areas. But what I would say is that thought leadership and ecosystems will be differentiated even when AI commoditizes some spaces, because it's in the looking at the ideas, testing the ideas, and then applying insight where you'd see real value coming through.
Great. Thank you. Cheryl Chamberlain, Richard Cockle, and Priya Kuring, it has been an absolute pleasure spending the last 45 minutes with you. I have found it incredibly interesting, and I hope the audience has as well. We have one slide ending this, and that is the Global Thought Leadership Institute was established to build standards. Part of that is certifications, and there's a certification event coming up in New York, and also another one in London, and then another one in February in Houston, I believe. And so lots of that activity. If you're interested in what the GTLI does, go to gtli.org and it's all there. I want to thank our panel again, Cheryl, Rich, Priya. It's been a really terrific conversation. I really appreciate your time today. I know you had to get up really early, Cheryl. It's getting late for you, Rich and Priya. So I'm the lucky one in the middle in New York. But thank you. It's been really great. And everyone, thank you for joining and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.